Hi, I'm Dana, and today I wanted to talk about parenting autistic kids because it's not something I've experienced with. I do not have children or any experience with any, but I've still gotten quite a lot of messages from various parents, some of which are very rude, and others of which are very, very kind and say that I've really helped them understand their child more or asking me questions about being an autistic child and things like that. And I thought, it's probably something that would be a useful video to some people. So to be very, very clear, I don't have any education in autistic children or children in general. I know nothing about children. I could not keep one alive. However, I do remember being an autistic child despite not having a diagnosis. I remember the things that my parents did that I thought, yo, this is really good parenting. And I remember some of the things that they did where I thought, I would never do that to a child. I feel really, really lucky to have had the parents that I had. They were fantastic parents for the most part. Everyone makes mistakes. No one is a perfect parent. But overall, my parents were bloody absolutely fantastic. And I think that's at least given me an insight of what good parenting is, even though I don't have any experience or knowledge myself. I just know what it was like to be an autistic kid. The first thing I want to put out there is that I do think that parents of autistic children need to spend more time listening to, or at least not talking over, the community of autistic adults. There seems to be constant discussion of how autistic adults hate the parents of autistic children, and we don't. I do not dislike the parents of autistic children. I think you're doing a tough job. I think the parents of most autistic children are doing a great job. I do not have an issue with any of you. But then you come across the parents where I get the comments on my Instagram reels being like, oh, well, my little girl they thought she was autistic, but we just put her on a vegan diet and gave her extra supplements and now she's not autistic anymore, so you just need to change your diet. And it's like, oh, fuck you. I'm sorry, I have nothing else to say to those types of people. I'm just like, fuck off. That's that. But the fact of the matter is most parents of autistic children are parents just trying to do their best for their kid. Simple fact of that. And chances are you're going to be able to do that better if you listen to the people that remember being the autistic kid in the situation. For me, the main thing I remember really appreciating from especially my mum when I was a kid, my dad was great too, but mostly my mum, she would always tell me why. I know it's a thing that kids will ask why and then just keep going after you explain to them why. And obviously if your kid's doing that, they're being a kid, make them stop or keep answering. I don't have experience with children. I don't know what you'd do in that situation. But if your kid asks a genuine why, it needs an answer. And I mean that with things like my mum would be like, you need to get up and get ready for school. Why? Because we have to send you to school, because otherwise we get arrested because we're not being good parents, because we're not providing you with an education and school starts at this time, so you need to get up now so that we're ready for that time. Okay then. Or if my mum told me tidy your room, why? Because it helps to have a tidier room so that you don't have to struggle to find your things, and so that you can do X, Y, Z, and so that we can do X, Y, Z. She gave me these very clear explanations of, well, we need to do it because of this. Because things like tidying my room, tidying up after myself in the kitchen, going to bed at a sensible time, all that kind of stuff, I was like, but I don't want to, so why? Whereas if my mum explained well, in future, X, Y, Z will happen if you do or don't do this. Yeah, well, I want to do it now. I understand what the point of doing it is. As an autistic person, I'm very much I need things to have a point. If something has a logical conclusion as to there's an outcome to me doing it, then I will do it. And like I say, I get that some kids just ask why just for the sake of it, and you got to deal with that however parents deal with that. But when they're asking you why in regards to a social thing or a life thing, for example, I don't remember any specific questions because I was a child, but I'd ask my mum why people behaved in certain ways, or why such and such said this, or why such and such did this. And she'd explain oh, well, I don't know for sure because I'm not that person, but I think they did it because. And then I'd go, okay, so people work like this, and I can understand that now. And she'd give me explanations for social things and everything else in life. And it just gave me a better understanding of the world. That's really important. But on the other side of that, one thing I wish that she'd done more is ask why. In my teen years, my relationship with my mum was rocky purely because things like tidy your room, suddenly I didn't have the energy to do that. I was going through this weird autistic burnout, come depression, just not having a good time. And I just didn't do the things that she asked or told me to do because I didn't have the energy. But to her, it just looked like laziness. So we were constantly butting heads because she was like, you're lazy. And I was like, no, I'm not. But to her, it just came across that way. And I really wish that she'd just sat down and been like, why haven't you taken the bin bags out? Why haven't you cleaned your room? Why haven't you done your homework? Because I would have told her, like, Mum, I'm so tired all the time. I'm exhausted. I don't even have the energy to like do the things I enjoy doing, never mind the stuff I don't want to do. But she never asked why. And I think that goes for most parents. I think most parents don't ask their kids why often enough. And it's easy for me to say that as someone who isn't a parent, you know. I understand that, like, you've only got so much patience, you only have so many hours in a day, you've got a lot of stuff going on as a parent and as an adult. I get it. But I do think it's important to ask your kids why things are happening to them. Why are you doing this? Why? The next thing that I think my parents did really well, and the way that I think is good parenting, obviously there's different ways of good parenting, it's not the be all and end all because my parents did it, but one of the ways I think they parented me really well was that they never ever fought my battles for me, but they made sure I had all the support I needed to be able to like fight it myself, you know? I think there's especially an issue personally, and this might be a little controversial, but I think a lot of autistic children are kind of too sheltered and almost too looked after, especially those with like lower support needs. And it leads to becoming an autistic adult who just doesn't know how to do stuff and doesn't know how to fight their own battles and doesn't know how to live as an adult. And I think there's every chance that they can learn that, but they could have also just been taught as a kid if their parents had left them to do stuff more. You know, and this isn't research. There's no, like, as far as I'm aware, studies about this. It comes purely from my own experience of growing up with an older brother who had an autism diagnosis. And he was one of those people that got offered almost too much support. He got offered much more than he needed. And it means that he just hasn't coped very well as an adult. Whereas I've done, you know, not to shit on him, I've done better coping as an adult, although still not brilliantly, purely because, like, when something went wrong or when someone was rude to me or when anything happened, I had to deal with it myself. I had to figure out what I was going to do to fix the situation. I couldn't just go to my mum or my support worker or whoever else and be like, this has happened to me, fix it. I had to fix it. And like I say, my parents always offered me lots and lots of support to do so. I could go to them for advice and just to talk out the situation and figure it out myself or whatever else at any time. I had a lot of support from my parents, but they didn't do it for me. And I really feel like that means that I'm equipped with more life skills than I would have been otherwise. And this is another one where I can empathise that I think, like, being a parent, you don't want your kid to get hurt. You don't want your kid to be upset. You don't want to sit there and watch your kid cry because they don't know what they're going to do next. And I'm sure my parents, like, you know, sometimes my dad cried with me. I know that it upset my parents, but they still let me do it myself. And although it was difficult and hard and shitty sometimes at the time, like, there were so many times I was like, why won't you just do it for me? I need help and you won't help me. But they were helping me by supporting me to cope with it myself so I'd know what to do next time. And, you know, with hindsight as an adult, I'm really glad that they did that. And my next thing that I'm really glad they did is allowing accommodations. I feel like a lot of people try to make their autistic kid act normally. They try and just, they're like being neurotypical. Don't stim, don't do this, don't enjoy that, just be normal. Whereas my parents, like, even without the autism diagnosis, they were very much just, kids are kids, that's how they are, that's what they do. And that meant that I was allowed a lot more accommodations than I think a lot of other children got, even without my parents knowing I was autistic. So for example, things like, I had one of those like children's sippy cups, you know, the ones that have like the little lid and the sucky bit and the handle on either side. And every single night that I can remember, I would go up to bed, I'd brush my teeth with me when we're all out, I'd go to bed, I'd get my plastic cup, I'd throw it down the fucking stairs, someone would fill it up with juice and throw it back up, I'd go get it, and I could like sip on that until I went to sleep. And, you know, a lot of parents would have had their kids stop doing that at like probably 5 or 6 or something, maybe younger, I don't know. They would have taken that sippy cup away from them. Mine didn't. I had that until I was about 9, maybe 10. It was just such a comfortable item to me. And there were times that my mum would be like, yeah, that's looking a bit ratty. Are you sure you want to keep that? And I'd be like, yes, I'm not parting with this ever, ever, ever. And she'd just be like, okay then. And, you know, I got to an age where they're like, you can't just throw it down and expect us to give you juice. You need to sort this before you go up to bed. You know, I still had to grow up. I couldn't be like a little tiny baby child forever. But they didn't wrench away this comfort item I had either. And that goes for like dolls and teddy bears and all sorts of other crap that I had. I mean, looking over at my giant VHS collection, I'm obviously still somewhat of a hoarder. But as a kid, like, I wanted to keep everything ever. And my parents would work with me to get rid of some stuff, but when it was things like that, where it was like very a comfort item, they'd let me keep it. And I just think it's so important to allow those small accommodations to any child, but especially autistic children. Trying to take things off them or make them behave a certain way to be normal, it just isn't going to work. They're not neurotypical. They're not going to be normal. I don't think most people, neurotypical or otherwise, are what is fully considered normal anyway. And autistic kids just ain't going to fit that mould. They're their own little person and they should be treated as such. I understand that, like, again, this is all nuanced. This is all, none of it's black and white. It's all very personal to the situation, the specific child and the parents and the way that you parent already and all that kind of stuff. But I just think it's very important to allow children those little accommodations that can make their life that bit easier. It just makes them that little bit less stressed, that little bit less overwhelmed. It's so easy for you to just take it off them or whatever. And it can be so difficult for that child to have that happen. So why make it go through that? Why make the kid go through that? And like I say, no parent's perfect. So another one that I really wish my parents had thought about is that autistic children and autistic adults tend to have a very strong long-term memory. And that means that if you say something to me, I'll have forgotten it like 20 minutes later, but about a week later, I'll suddenly remember it, and then it's with me forever. So, for example, I remember being probably about 5 or 6 and crying over something, and one of my family members told me, "Wow, you have a really ugly face when you cry." And that stuck with me almost 20 years later. Every time I cry, I think about that, I remember that. There's comments from all through my childhood and teen years, from like family members, parents, friends, all of it. I remember it all, and it still affects me when I remember it. It still really hurts. And I get that your patience is thin and your kid's being a dick or whatever else. You can't 100% control everything you say all the time. But it is important with autistic kids to have that extra bit of patience and that extra bit of kindness. Because the things you say to us as a child, and this, again, it applies to most children. If you say something horrible to a child, there's every chance it's going to stick in their brain and cause trauma later down the line. But for autistic people, I think it's just that little bit more likely that that's what's going to happen. It's something we're going to internalise and really dwell on and feel bad about even 20, 30, 40 years later. And it's not fun. And I understand it can't be prevented every time. And there's probably some things I remember that they did not mean in that way at all. But I still get the trauma from it all. So I just really wish that more parents in general, as well as parents of autistic kids, would just take that moment to swallow whatever slightly mean thing they were going to say on the spur of the moment and say something else, or not say anything at all. With autistic kids, though, that can also go for like jokes and pranks and little things like that. Because it's a case of if you tell us, I'm trying to think of a good one. Like, I remember one of my neurotypical friends being told when we were kids, like, "Oh no, you can't go out in the dark. The reason that your mum don't let you out in the dark is because if you go out in the dark, you lose your shadow forever. It just gets like eaten by all the other shadows. And you don't have a shadow anymore." And like, because it wasn't my mum telling me, I was just like, "Oh, I'm pretty sure that's bullshit. I've definitely been out in the dark before and I'm fairly certain I still have a shadow actually." But if my mum had told me that, who knows if I would have gone out in the dark ever again, quite frankly. So it's things like that, it's unfortunate that the parents of autistic kids kind of have to think more about these things. But you've got an autistic kid, you've got to do what's best for them now. And finally, I'm going to end this with, this is your kid. You know your kid better than anyone else does. Like if you've kept a child alive for more than one day, you know more about children than I do. And you most definitely know more about your own child than I do. So although I have tried to make this as general as possible to fit to different situations and stuff, it may not apply at all to your situation and your child. I try very much to be understanding of the fact that, parenting is very individual. It's very, it's not even individual because there's two individuals involved, as in the parents and the child, and they're both completely different. So every combination is a new one. The most important thing is that you pay attention to your child, listen to your kid, talk to them, figure them out. If you're watching videos like this, I think it's really fantastic that you find out more about autism as a whole, but every autistic person's different. You know, your kid might be similar to me, they're not going to be the same as me, they're not going to be the same as any other autistic person because we're all different. And they're going to grow up into an autistic adult. And they're going to be able to do that successfully by having parents that love and support them. They're the most important things. You know, like some of the things here are things that I think my parents kind of screwed up on. They're things I could have really done without in childhood. But overall, my parents loved me unconditionally and they supported me through everything. So I'm not going to pretend they were bad parents because the most important things are love and support. And food and water and keeping them alive. But I mean, like, emotionally and mentally, they're the most important things. And they're all you need to provide your child mentally, really, in my opinion. You know, like, educate them, talk to them, blah, blah, blah. But love and support them most of all. And I know that there's loads of videos out there like this. But like I say, every autistic person's different. We're all going to be given different advice. We all have different childhoods. We all have different parents. And your autistic child's different to all of us. So as much as you can take these tips and bits of advice and things that I reckon, essentially, into consideration, you know what's best for your kid. And as much as I hope this is helpful, maybe none of it was helpful to you in your situation, your child, and that's fine. I don't know, it feels like a bit fraudulent to be making a video like this when I'm not a parent, but also I have a lot of opinions from being an autistic kid, so I want to make it, and I hope you enjoyed it in some way or learnt something from it. Yeah, I'm gonna go. So whoever you are and wherever you are, I hope you have a lovely morning, evening, afternoon, day, week, whatever you're having, I hope it's a good one. And I'll see you again in a few days.